Hey, this is Sam from Cheam, and you're listening to Breakdowns for Breakfast.
Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of Breakdowns for Breakfast. I am one of your hosts, Danger, and the other host here is a guy named Monster. Would you please say hi, Monster?
That was lovely. Much better. Thank you for acknowledging I am half as necessary as you are.
I have always said that I cannot break down the album without you. So you are essential to this process, but I am a host and Monster is also a host, co-host, if you will.
And I just realized I was trying to say I am equally as important, but said I'm half as important.
No, we're going to stick with half as important. So on this episode of Breakdowns for Breakfast, we're going to be talking Metallica's album Ride the Lightning that was released July 27th, 1984. Now, this was a request from Monster's brother. Monster, yes. You have come dressed for the occasion. Listeners cannot see this, but Monster is wearing a Metallica shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that you're a huge Metallica fan.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why this album?
Well, so I asked my brother that because... Little peek behind the curtain, his wife, Amy, is the one that asked us to do the Kings of Leon album.
I'm going to try to not hold that personal against her.
I mean, it's a dumpster fire. And I actually talked to her a little bit after we recorded that episode, and she has her reasons for that album being important, and that's fine.
Okay. Like we have said, every album is somebody's favorite album. Okay. But why this one?
So as far as this request though goes, my brother Brian, he is to Metallica as I am to 311. It's his favorite band. He loves them dearly. The music means a lot to him. The lyrics mean a lot to him. And he basically said, I'd love to hear you guys do a Metallica album. And I said, so which one? And he sort of kind of went back and forth on it because this is kind of surprising. My brother loves everything from Kill 'Em All to 72 Seasons, and some of his favorite stuff is the Load Reload era. So when I say he's like die hard in, he's pretty dialed in. The one thing he and I disagree on is Saint Anger, though, because I actually think Saint Anger is pretty cool, and he hates it. But hey, most people do.
That's fine. And Brian, before we go any further, thank you for listening, and thank you for the suggestion. Now, from this point forward, try not to take anything personal.
Okay, so here's the thing. When he was trying to pick an album, he said, like, let's pick an old one. Let's do something
he picked
old.
An old one.
He did, and I find this album really, really interesting. Now, granted, like I said, they were his favorite band, which means the whole time I was growing up, I heard all of these albums all the time. So I've heard this album plenty of times, but I honestly think this is the first time I've really sat down and paid attention to it.
I'm going to 100% agree with you. This is the first time I've listened to this one from beginning to end. And
there's a lot of stuff I think is really, really good. There's some things that are a little bit off. And here's why. When we were doing that Offspring album with Matt, he mentioned something about that album, Ixnay on the Ombre, being a transitional record. And I think that's exactly what this is. This is them going from the super thrashy, almost punk rock Kill 'Em All to the big, polished, masterpiece that is Master of Puppets. This is that weird spot in between that's kind of bridging the gap. And so I don't think it's quite as cohesive as either one of those other two, but I don't think those other two exist without this one in between them. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Now, going back to the Offspring thing, yes, Ixnay on the Hombre was definitely a transition album, and if I remember correctly, we both really liked it. Didn't love it, but we both really enjoyed it. I find it hard to say that this is a transitional album because, yes, while I understand exactly what you're saying, and one of the things is that, what's his name? Cliff Burton, bass player.
Cliff Burton, yeah.
Yeah, who was their second bass player, but, Cliff Burton died, of course, and we know. But
wait, he was their first bass player.
I am about 95% certain he was their second bass player. So I am going to look it up right now.
So the Metallica bass player history is Cliff Burton was their bass player on the first, 4 albums? No, 3, because after Master of Puppets, he passed away. And then that's when Jason Newsted joined the band. And not that Jason did anything wrong, but he wasn't Cliff. And so the guys kind of
harassed
really,
him
really bad. And that's why there's literally no bass in the mix of Injustice for All, because they basically were mad at him for not being Cliff.
Right. So, okay. I was right. He was their second bass player. Their first bass player was a guy named Ron McGovney. And the way that Metallica was formed was that James Hetfield and Ron McGovney actually responded to a newspaper ad or a magazine ad or whatever that Lars Ulrich put out. And that pretty much formed the band. And that was where they recorded their first song, of original material. And but Ron didn't last very long in the band. So Cliff was their second bass player.
Cool. Cliff's the only one that's ever been on a proper Metallica album.
No, that's fine. That's fair. Ron didn't record anything.
There was a lot of guys in a lot of bands before they actually became known for who they are.
Right. No, that's fair.
Fair enough. But fair enough.
All right. So, Cliff brought a lot of music theory and whatnot to this, which you can hear in the album, which I think that's where they got out of the thrash. It's like this album is like thrash rooted in music theory, which I appreciate. But what I also found within that and within some of the lyrics of this, because you have lyrics that are a bit deeper than just surface level, thrash metal lyrics, is I kind of felt like where Rush started to incorporate some deeper, some more intricate lyrics and things. Once Neil Peart started writing lyrics, I kind of felt like that's what this was. But I have a really hard time saying that this was a transitional album. I feel like this is very second album, but I feel like this is kind of where they started to find their sound more. The sound that kind of carried through to the, Black Album, Load, Reload, that kind of stuff. So it kind of defined the first chunk of what this band was. Kill 'Em All was just nasty and got their name out there, basically.
Well, that's what I mean. Do you have a song I'm thinking of Master of Puppets. Do you have a song like Welcome Home? Without doing Fade to Black first?
No, that's fair.
You see what I'm saying? Yeah. The way Battery starts on Master of Puppets. Do you get that if you don't start this album with Fight Fire with Fire? Because if you don't remember, Kill 'Em All starts, it sounds like the beginning or the end of a concert. It's like them vamping with the cymbals, and it's like there's no pretty interlude. There's no build. It just starts with, and you can almost hear James just yelling, "What's up, we're Metallica," right. and kicking in like that. So, but you're absolutely right.
Kill 'Em All just dives right in hard.
Yeah.
But that was them being young and more inexperienced and actually how to do it. So, yeah, I got it.
And to your point about Cliff, I saw the same kind of stuff that Cliff Burton sort of, I don't want to say had a better understanding of songwriting, but he did bring, like you said, musical theory to these guys. And another big part of the reason this album sounds the way it is because of the producer, Flemming Rasmussen. I think that's how you say it.
I'm glad you did it.
He was actually, I listened to some interviews with him from his time working on this album, and he talks about Cliff kind of bringing ideas and then also them essentially giving Lars drum lessons in the studio.
Well, he did it because Lars still sucks as a drummer.
And I got some stuff to say about Lars on this album that actually kind of impressed me when you actually focus in on the drums. But there are times, and one of the things that Rasmussen said was Lars grew up in a jazz background, and a lot of times he's thinking fills and feeling more than locking in on a steady tempo. And he said, when they first started recording, they could feel the tempos kind of shifting up and down, and they had to really work with Lars to get him to stay onto a click. And like I said, there's one or two parts on here where you can feel like there's one or two tom rolls that he does here or there that sound like they might go off the rails, but it sort of fits with kind of the thrashier moments.
I mean, okay, so it fits with the thrashy moments, kind of, okay? I mean, thrash, to me, like, the image I get in my head when I think of, like, thrash metal is, like, dirty basement sleeping on a mattress with, like, cat pee on it and all. Sure, he's a trash drummer. So you play in a trash basement in a decent band.
Okay, so to break down all the things you just said, it started off fun because you were kind of describing what it was like for them to record this album.
Yeah.
And then you sort of went off the deep end because you said he's trash and the band's just decent. And I think both of those things are incorrect.
Okay, so speaking of a mattress and cat pee, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag to pee on the mattress. I don't love this. I don't. And that's something I had trouble with here. And you seem like you want to say something, and so I won't stop you from speaking anymore, and I'll carry on that thought after you're done.
Well, okay, so here's what I'll say, and I'm being completely honest with this. I do really like Metallica, and a huge part of that is the good feelings I associate with my brother growing up.
Right.
And
there's a bit of nostalgia behind it.
But I can also honestly say that this flavor of Metallica is not my favorite flavor. And so when I was going through this, as I was scoring it at the end, I was wrestling with three basic concepts. Number one, how much do I like it? Number two, how good is it? And number three, how important to music is it? Because I feel like this album really did change the trajectory of Metallica, which in turn changes the trajectory of heavy metal, which is a crazy thing to think about, but that's like how big Metallica is, And with all that being said, while my brother was playing a ton of Metallica around me, he was also playing a ton of Iron Maiden around me. And I think I've made it pretty clear that given the choice between the two of them, I'd have to go Iron Maiden. That's just, I like it better. So
it's fine. You can.
So I found myself kind of comparing the two throughout too, because especially this era, because funny, 1984, when this came out, my favorite Iron Maiden album, Power Slave, also came out. And so one day, out of curiosity, I listened to them back to back and was like, I know most people hold Ride the Lightning in higher regard, but if I was stranded on an island and only have one of them, I'm picking Power Slave.
Okay, so I feel like Ride the Lightning had more mass appeal, whereas you had these other smaller thrash bands, not smaller, but these other thrash bands that weren't quite as big as Metallica was, because Metallica they literally rode the lightning to the top, and
good job.
Yeah, thank you. I worked hard on that for about 12 seconds in my head, but no, they really did blow up really quick, and I don't know if part of that is what happened with Dave Mustaine and then that getting out or what. I don't know what all it was, the reason why they did. I was not listening to music in 84. In fact, I wasn't alive in 84. But so whatever the cause for that, okay. But I do think that more people would, grab Ride the Lightning over any other album of this year, in this genre, let's put it that way, because it's more familiar. You've got hits on it that people know, whereas there's not any that the mass majority of people aren't going to know much off of any Iron Maiden album. Let's put it that way.
You better watch your mouth.
No,
I don't disagree. I just don't want to listen to you say it.
No, I would rather pick an Iron Maiden album, honestly. Like, where I was in this one is I understand that, and I kind of had to start coming to this realization in it. This album is 10 tracks long. It's not a long album, but they had a lot of... Is it 8? Okay, then that solidifies what
even shorter.
Saying. Yeah, even shorter. So, yeah, cool. Okay, so 8 tracks long. They had to fill 8 tracks with plenty of sound. And I think that was part of what was behind a lot of this, because every one of these songs, every one of them, I feel like goes on for too long. I think there's one that I was okay with, and I'll talk about that. But I just feel like, if we were to tighten these songs up some and leave some of this, what I was calling thrash metal fish, leave some of this thrash metal jam band to live performances, I think would have been great, because that's the kind of stuff you want to see live. You want to see, Kirk Hammett throw out like an amazing solo like he does all over this album. I mean, his solos are fantastic, but at the same time, I had to stop listening to this one in headphones really quick, because like some of the notes and stuff he hits are just too big in my ears, too high pitched in my ears. And maybe that's just because I'm getting old, and okay, fine. But that's one of my biggest things about this one. It's either fantastic and I love what's happening, or I'm bored out of my mind.
We've talked about this on other episodes. We did an episode on Dio. We did an episode on Blind Guardian.
You're right.
There will definitely be at least a handful of Iron Maiden ones in the future, depending on how long the show goes. But I'm not a huge fan of long songs.
You saying that doesn't make me want to keep going.
But so I've said it on those episodes. I've said it on other albums. I don't love long songs. I am a fan of 3-4 minutes, especially when it's heavy, especially when it's fast and aggressive. If it goes on.
You're the one that brought us the Cheem album with the shortest songs in history. And so, I mean, they're super nice guys. Right. They did an intro for it, which I'm going to put on this album, on this episode.
Okay, great. Yeah. You know what? I'll just call James when we're done and just be like, hey, man, why don't you throw us out an intro? He's probably got nothing better to do. Yeah. What I will say is the length of these songs doesn't typically fatigue me, because there's usually something going on. And whereas like the Blind Guardian album, I distinctly remember there being songs where it was like 48 measures of the same guitar riff while a dude just noodles on top. Whereas like a lot of these
some of their songs have like 5 solos in them, things like that. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yes. And so like on this album, yes, there are parts that like it's predominantly Kirk soloing, but if you listen to the chord progressions and stuff behind it, the song is going through its movements as well. So you've got the band playing the verse riff, and then you got the band playing the pre-chorus riff, and Kirk's just doing melody and noodle on top. So I never really felt like checking out during most of that.
I don't know. I just kind of got tired of hearing it at a certain point, and it's a 45-minute album. And I would say probably maybe 20 minutes of it is worth it.
I disagree with that. I think it's pretty stacked. Now I will say, talking about long songs,
47:26. I was wrong about 45. Yeah. It's 47:26. No, but I'm just saying, like, there's a real good chunk of this album that I'm just, okay, we're good. I don't need to keep going.
Well, and again, I think this is going to come down to personal taste. This is. When I was young, I was hearing a lot of this kind of music. Like I said, Iron Maiden, Metallica, some of the other bands too. But those were the two big ones in our household. And so I heard this stuff all the time growing up. And so I enjoy this style of music. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to go pick up a Anthrax album or a Slayer album and listen to it from start to finish and love every minute of it. But specifically Metallica and Iron Maiden, there's something I find much more engaging about their songwriting and their guitar playing and their lyrics and stuff. So again, just to preface again, Brian, go after Casey. He's obviously taken a bunch of hot takes so far that I disagree with. But at the end of this episode, just remember, I love Metallica, but this is not my favorite Metallica. And just, if my score is not as high as you think it should be, just cut me some slack.
And bring it.
And I guarantee it's going to be higher than what we gave the Kings of Leon album.
Yeah, it is. So what I will say is I am much more of a fan of like the Black Album to the Reload era of Metallica. And you got to say the era, because they were releasing other stuff within that, because there are things that are not studio albums. Like you had Garage Inc. in there as well and all. Like, I mean, you talked about it's not your favorite flavor, and it's like Metallica is like the Baskin Robbins of thrash metal. They got 32 albums and you pick a flavor.
And so here's what I think is pretty cool.
I also really enjoyed S&M, but go on.
Yeah, okay, and I'm going to bring up S&M on one of these songs in particular. I think it is kind of cool that they sort of went from this kind of thrash thing to the 90s where they went a little bit more, mainstream. I mean, they got Bob Rock. They went into more of a hard rock, still a lot of thrashy metal influence, but they were, they kind of slowed it down, tuned it down a little bit. After a few years of that, they started putting out stuff like Death Magnetic, Hardwired to Self-Destruct. And they went back to, tuned to E, thrashy stuff. And some of those songs are just as solid as some of the stuff from Master of Puppets. So I think it's cool that they sort of, you hear about bands going through different, like you said, phases and growing in their career, whatever. We often talk about the nail in the coffin when they say this album's more mature. Yeah, it means it's boring. Like,
yeah, this is a mature album.
So I like it when a band can change, but then can also like revert back to something because even they recognize it's cool and they want to do it again. And I heard what you said, and I'm choosing not to listen to it. Okay,
that's fine. Okay, so I do want to, before we jump into the track listing, I do want to acknowledge that they formed in October of 81. This came out in July of 84, so not even 4 years together, they've put out 2 studio albums, which I think it was probably a lot easier to do, especially when your album is 8 tracks long.
And I'll get into, one more thing before we get into the song by song. And this is specifically directed at Brian, but also everybody listening. I think most of what we're going to talk about here is going to be very surface level, how we feel about each song. I did a lot of extra research and have some cool factoids and some cool behind the scenes stuff on this album that some of it is inevitably going to come up as we talk. But a couple days from now, Second Breakfast, we're going to be releasing kind of a companion piece to go along with this, sort of the history of the writing and recording of Ride the Lightning. So if you're listening and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe he didn't say this. Oh, I cannot believe they didn't bring this up. Wait till Thursday.
And then say, oh my God, yeah.
Then send me the angry emails.
Yeah. Okay. So one more thing. No, you ready to jump into it?
I'm ready to jump in the fire.
Yeah. All right, so track 1, Fight Fire with Fire. This is track 1 of side A, so because this was released on vinyl originally. But anyway, all right, a little classical guitar intro. And I thought it was nice that they started with that. And that's where reading about this, going into it, it was like, okay, brought music theory to things and all. So I thought it was a neat thing that we kind of got that music theory, kind of feeling right up front. Like, okay, this is going to be a little bit different than before. I have listened to parts of Kill 'Em All. I don't think I've ever listened to the entire thing, but you're right. It's much more aggressive. This made it clear that it's going to be aggressive, but it's going to be more composed.
And starting the album with that classical guitar, that acoustic lead in, is sort of become a staple on a lot of Metallica records. But given my correct point that this is a transitional album, this is the first time they do it. But what makes it interesting, I am not transitioning, sir. Okay. I can't help I have feminine features. So, but what I will say is I feel like it's a very deliberate move to put that classical piece at the beginning, but then when the song kicks in proper
at 35 seconds,
it is fast and it is heavy. And it's almost like Metallica saying, like, right out the gate, we're better than you guys. Like, we are just as thrashy as y'all can be, but check this shit out. Y'all can't pull this off like we can. Even more so on some stuff later. But I thought, for me, I think this is a great album opener. It makes a statement.
Yep. Now, there is something within this album that I'm going to pick apart at different points, but it does not exist on this first track, that I feel like Hetfield's voice that we got later on. Yes, I know as he got older it definitely changed. But on this one, it's like they took all the low end out of a lot of his vocals, but I didn't feel it as much on this first track. But it's like they kind of had it tweaked a little more in that direction. And I don't know if that's because he was younger when he was singing it, or if that's how they really mixed his vocals. But I didn't like it. I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
I didn't mind his vocals on this track, though.
Yeah, no, I think his vocals, I agree. When I first put this on, I almost like forgot. Like when he first started singing, I was like, yeah, I don't think I've heard the album version of this song in a long time. I'm sure I've heard a live version of it within the past couple months, following him on social media and stuff. But I was like, yeah, I forgot. Like, again, this isn't my personal favorite flavor of Metallica. And when I think of James Hetfield's voice, you're exactly right. I think of that lower. Now he's got a like snarl to his voice is good. It fits for sure. But yeah, I like the lower sound. And I think it's more his age than any sort of studio trickery.
Right. No, that's fair. All right. So this is a standard thrash metal, Metallica thrash metal, up to 142. And then it becomes more of the Metallica tone for a quick minute. Like it has that Metallica feel. And I feel like that's something that I was picking up all throughout this album, is that you have where it's like they are pushing the thrash sound that they wanted to go for, but then they have their Metallica sound. And I feel like that at 142, we kind of got more of that. And that's kind of where I started, and I don't want to say I started to because it's just track one, but that's where I mean, like, it's fantastic at certain places and then it's boring at other places. And up until 142, like that little classical guitar intro I thought was really neat. And then it goes into that, like, that thrash sound. And I'm like, all right, cool. I mean, we're in, it's track one. But then it's like, it took a minute 42 to get to like, okay, this is the sound. This is good. I like this part. And, that lasts for a little while. I mean, I actually really liked it because then we got that up until 233. And then I think, that's where the solo started. But then there's the stuff happening in the background that I didn't pay much attention to, but I know what you're talking about, that the song is growing and evolving in the background.
Right. Now, and something I want to jump back to the chorus for a minute, because this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about with Lars. If you're just listening to this and just riding the wave,
riding the lightning.
Yeah, thank you. Much better. It's not even gonna, register. But for me, during the fight fire with fire, like that, like chorus, if you listen to the drums, it almost sounds like they go halftime. Fight fire with fire. So what it does is, on the first line, when James says fight fire with fire, he does go halftime. But then when James stops, he does like a blast beat, like, and then when James' vocals come back in, it's bump, 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 bump. And it's like, he didn't have to do that. He could have played it straight the whole way through and everybody wouldn't have batted an eye. But instead, he goes the extra mile just to change it up again. And I think that's great. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I don't think Lars gets enough credit for.
No, he Dutched it up. That's what I started to feel like in this, because he's Danish. So yeah, he Dutched it up, basically.
I'll tell you where I think he Dutched it up later on.
Was it at 256? Because he does a double bass in the middle of the solo that's just not needed.
No,
I like. It sounds like shit.
No, there's a song later where there's a couple times where I'm like, I can just picture them in the studio, just being like, you know what? It's 5 a.m. We've been doing this for 12 hours. Just print it. It's fine. It's good enough.
Fair.
But not on this song. On this song, I think everybody is firing on all cylinders, and I also like the little pre-Dimebag Daryl guitar dive at the very end that goes into nuclear explosion.
Yeah, where it ends in a very theatrical way. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
All right. So track 2, Ride the Lightning. The title track.
Yes.
You know, out of an 8-track album, you don't really have a lot of room to put your title track further back. So, you know, I do like the intro on this one. Again, intro, good.
So I was going to mention that before we started. I know you said, you know, you're not super into thrash metal or you're not super into Metallica, but I know you're a big fan of intros. And my God, there are some like iconic rock and metal intros on this album.
Okay, so I do want to go back to what you just said. I really like thrash metal live. I do not like to sit down and listen to thrash metal. If there's a thrash metal band opening for a band I want to go see, I'm all in. I'm having fun. And that's part of the trouble I have with this, because I went into this going, I have always said that I really enjoy the beginning of Metallica. Those first few albums are fantastic. And then listen to this, I was like, I don't, like, this show is making me re-question my entire childhood.
Well, so that did cross my mind too. Whenever you first were kind of saying that you were like, about this album, I was like, we've talked about Metallica before, and I kind of thought you were in until about like the Black Album, which is, I mean, I know a lot of people that'll say their favorite band is Metallica from Kill 'Em All to Injustice, and then they're done. It's like, okay, I guess that's fine, but like,
no, I've always said I really like Metallica up until about halfway through Reload, but I don't know, picking and choosing songs off of one. So, all right, okay, so I do want to say that this is one of the few tracks here, and this is the last time that Dave Mustaine got writing credits on this album, or on Metallica, period. And I thought it was interesting that he did get writing credits on this, you know, because at this point, Hammond had taken over completely. But I don't think Dave Mustaine recorded any album with them.
No. And he's got writing.
Speaking of, Dave Mustaine was just as much as part of Metallica as the Ron guy that I mentioned earlier.
Does that Ron guy have a writing credit on anything?
No.
Okay, so he wasn't.
Yeah,
but
fair.
nice try. So little factoid, stealing my second Breakfast Thunder. That's okay. Dave Mustaine has a writing credit on this one and one other song. Do you know what that song is?
I do. I have the writing credits for each song. So
yeah. Cute, real cute.
I came prepared, like you're supposed to for the show.
Yeah, well, yeah, tell me about it. This has 6 pages of notes on it.
I do not have 6 pages of notes, but anyway, all right. So this is the tone of Hetfield's voice that I do not like. So I already had trouble with this one as soon as he started singing. I remember when he started singing, because this is 6 minutes, 37 seconds, and we don't need 6:37 of this song. But
okay, so my notes were iconic intro, and then I put, I'm so used to hearing this song performed more recently that I kind of forgot how high James's voice was when the song first started. Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah, I had to readjust. However, with that being said, the line that he sings when he says, "Clash before my eyes," that melody,
yeah,
I've always liked the way he sings that.
Yeah. I'm with you on that.
I think his voice sounds really good there. You know what? You can fight me if you want to, but I got to brag on Lars one more time, okay? Because he does cool stuff on this song too. So you can actually probably, if you want to put a sound clip in here, you don't have to just put in the 2-second segments I'm saying. You can play like 20 seconds straight, or not even that long, because here's what he does. So there's a part where he slows the tempo down right before the bridge, and he does it twice. He does it at 218 to 220, and then it kicks up to its fastest, but then he brings it down a bit more from 221 to 223. Then it's like halftime, and then it cuts down again from 224 to 226. It all happens in the span of like 10 seconds. He changes the tempo tightly This isn't like a sloppy, like, Lars, what are you doing back there? He locks in with when the guitars change, and it's 10 seconds, but it's so cool. I love that part.
I'm going to go with this was a Lars, what are you doing back there?
I know it sounds really good. He like steadily slows it down while I don't know. It's a really creative thing to do to bridge that part.
Yeah. Okay. Hammett gives a solo in this song that I put down. Hammett gives the kind of solo that makes kids take guitar lessons and quit because they can't do it.
Okay, so this is one of my favorite solos too, because he does this like really cool like tapping thing that starts around 247.
Right.
But then it kind of bleeds into this more like lyrical, like those kind of single note, like get stuck in your head kind of melody solos. And so, yeah, I'm all in for all of that. And so,
well, hold on. So right as that is happening, because he does the hammer-ons and all that, and it's really neat. And that's what I was talking about, like the solo that makes kids quit playing guitar because they can't do that. Mm-hmm. But then it goes into that, and so it's this transition within his guitar solo that I thought was done really, really well. But then there's a transition from where it was more of the lyrical, like you're talking about, to where it becomes big and angry. And that transition happens at 3:38. And that's where I think Lars is doing a really good job there. And he's not a trash drummer in that part. He's actually a really good drummer. He doesn't dust it up.
He's not a trash drummer. He's a thrash drummer.
Sorry, he's a garbage drummer. I don't know what. He's a waste drummer. I don't know. I don't like Lars.
Look. Just because his snare drum sounded like a trash can on that one album doesn't mean he's a trash drummer. I
mean, sure. Okay, fine.
I'm still pissed off at him about the Napster thing, though. I'm not going to let that shit go.
Yeah, it was just a shitty move. That was. But this is way before Napster. This is before the internet.
But, okay, so what you were saying earlier about the length of the song, 6.5 minutes, it doesn't need to be that long.
No.
So the whole time Kirk is doing these different flavors of guitar solo, the music in the background keeps changing. And so for me, it's like, if the solo section go on for a long time? Yeah, it goes on for like 2+ minutes. But the whole time that's happening, Kirk's changing the way he's soloing. The music behind it is changing chord progressions. So for me, it's not like, again, I don't want to pick on him too much, but that Blind Guardian album, I just remember it being like just these crazy bombastic guitar solos that sound really cool for like 8 measures and then maybe 12. But now we're at 16. This is 24 measures. Please stop. Like it just kept going on and on and on. But I don't feel that way here because the music keeps changing.
That's fair. That's fair. All right. So this is where I started going, okay, these are going to be long songs. Obviously 6:37's a long song already, but at 5:21, it should have been done because we've gotten guitar wanking for as long as it needs to go on at this point. And there's nothing after 5:21 that was needed at all.
So one thing I've noticed about Metallica, for better or for worse, is most bands, you're exactly right. They do verse, chorus, and then you've got your bridge or your guitar solo. And then you might do a chorus or another piece to end the song. Metallica is going to hit you with a third verse, whether you want it or not. And that's where the length of some of these songs happen because James comes back in. And that's exactly what you're saying. Like there's this whole extra verse and chorus that you might get in other songs, but it's usually not preceded by 2.5 minutes of guitar wanking.
Right.
Like you have a 30-second bridge. And so now you're at 4.5, 5 minutes long and your song's over. But Metallica, James is like, I'm not finished. I have something else to say. And we go on for another 1.5 minutes.
But James, your tone is terrible on this song. I don't need you to say anything else.
However, one last thing. I've mentioned this on other songs. I appreciate when a band also recognizes the coolest part of their song. And I love the fact that they just do that intro riff like one more stab at the end. And I appreciate him doing that because I love that riff is nasty.
Track 3, For Whom the Bell Tolls. If you don't know this song, this is probably the biggest hit off of this album. If you don't know this song, where have you been?
So, funny story, when this song comes on the radio, if I'm in the car and I hear that bong,
right,
bong, I immediately get nervous because it's either going to be For Whom the Bell Tolls or it's going to be AC/DC. And
that's fair.
I never, ever want it to be AC/DC.
I don't know if AC/DC fans actually want it to be AC/DC. I think AC/DC falls into what I was talking about actually over on the Ready Set Radio show, where it's a Stockholm band where people have heard them so much they like them. I don't like AC/DC.
I don't either. And it's like, is it For Whom the Bell Tolls or Hell's Bells? And there's a clear winner on which song is better. And so anytime it's like, as soon as it's either I'm like, yes, and I can like sigh of relief. I still might change it because I've heard the song 7,000 times.
That's fine. That's fine. Okay.
At least I'm not offended.
Right. All right. So, of course, that intro with the bells is great. I mean,
yes.
This was one that I kind of had to go, it's just a classic. This is just a damn good song. It's just, it is. But once it goes into those chugs, I'm ready for the song to start. And I gotta say, it's been a long time since I've actually listened to this song from beginning to end. I've heard it a bunch of times, but I don't think I've ever really listened to this song. And so, okay, so we get that guitar and the bells, cool. And then the chugs come in, and I'm ready for it to start. I'm ready to kick off. We got the intro, and it was a prolonged intro. Cool. We don't get his first words until 2:06. Why? Why does it wait so long to get there?
Because we're having a good time without it. I don't know. Like, for me, I'm not bored. And I'll even say this about Iron Maiden. Sometimes I feel like their songs are long just for the sake of being long. On some of their newer albums, they'll actually advertise. They're like 10 tracks, 75 minutes of music. And I'm like, oh my God, please no. Is that a threat? So like for me, I don't mind a long song if you're doing something with it. And that first 2 minutes of this song just keeps gradually building and shifting. And so by the first little bit of the song, by the time James comes in on the vocals, we're on to a different sounding song almost.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I don't know. I kind of wanted it to get there quicker, but you're right. It does build, and that's fine. But I just wanted the party to start.
Well, yeah, because I will say for me during that intro stretch, I think my favorite part of it is, so you kind of got the build up or whatever, and then you hear the bass doing this. It's just a chromatic walk down. It's just do, 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 do. But then when the guitar locks in with it, even for 1984 thin production, it still sounds huge. It
does. You're right, and I do
that.
like the walk downs on the guitar of this song. They're great, and that's one of the things about this one that I realized after listening to this probably, I don't know, the fourth time over. Musically, the music behind this is what I've always loved about this song, because Hetfield's voice is in that higher end again, that high pitch, and giving low end would have really helped the tone of the song. Because this is a dark and heavy song. If they gave his voice some balls.
So it is, I will say, a hurdle with listening to an album like this is knowing like how albums are produced today and the sound that we're used to hearing today. Because no one can deny Cliff Burton was a special kind of bass player. Now, I have a lot of love for Jason Newsted, and I kind of wish he was still in the band personally, but I think had Cliff stayed with the band, I mean, I'm not saying that their career would have been any different. I mean, God knows, I don't think Metallica wants their career to be any different, but
they've conquered the world of this. Yeah.
I just wish the bass was louder on this album because and I took note of a couple of parts that I'll throw out there that if you're not specifically listening for it, you won't hear it. But Cliff does some neat little runs, and he does like his own little flourishes here or there. Yeah. And I wish that was a little louder in the mix. But 1984, I mean, this has more bass than most metal albums from 1984. Again, not Power Slave by Iron Maiden because Steve Harris is like a lead bass player, but that's neither here nor there. We'll do that album next week.
No, it's not going to be next week. We've already talked about the albums for next week. Anyway, okay, so in 1984, and I know that I don't want to steal too much of your second Breakfast Thunder.
No, please. I
know that they were recording this one basically at night because they couldn't afford studio time during the day and all that, but I was really surprised that in 1984 at night, they were able to sneak a horse in to make the sound at 413.
And I'll go ahead and share another one of my fun facts since you didn't bring it up. So the bell at the beginning, did you see what that is?
No.
They brought in this giant anvil and Lars just smacked the shit out of it with a metal hammer, and they liked the way it sounded. So
works.
Because like I said, I've got some really cool stories from Rasmussen, the producer, and that was one of the stories he told was where like they wanted this bell sound, and instead of like getting a sound effect record, they just hauled this massive heavy anvil up there. He said they might have like pitched it down a little bit to give it more of like a bong kind of sound. He said, but it's just them whacking an anvil.
All right, so let's round out side A with track 4, Fade to Black. Nice intro with the acoustic and the electric guitars with it. I thought that was a really cool sound. And to be honest with you, I can't say that I remember hearing it before this album. But I do know that other people have copied that sound since this.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's a ton of people, but it was done really well here.
This, to me, is the first time Metallica really said, we can be heavy without being thrash.
Right.
Because, and I know my brother's going to push back on me a little bit on this, but I'm going to use the term anyway.
Brian, don't push him. Don't push him. He's gentle. He breaks.
I heard the producer of the album call it this. I've seen it listed in other places like this. This is a power ballad. And
I don't think you're wrong.
And now, granted, it's not a love song. This isn't Every Rose Has Its Thorn. This is a serious song. But that the dynamics of it were something that Metallica had never done before and has become a staple of their sound. Because, again, talking about this transitional record, had they not wrote Fade to Black, would Unforgiven ever happen?
Probably not.
I don't know. And Unforgiven is one of their, I don't know, in the pantheon of Metallica songs. Maybe it's not in the top 10, but for a while it was, so I don't know. I think the song's, I think the song's great, but then I also think of how monumental it was for them in their career as well.
Okay, so I do also want to point out that this, I know it's just track 4, but this is the first track on the album that all 4 current members actually have a writing credit on. Which I thought I thought it was interesting that like before we got somebody that was kicked out of the band before. If I remember correctly, he was just left at a gas station or something. But
sounds about right.
Yeah, but this all 4 members, and I think it shows. But also at the same time, this is where I realized that I'm just going to struggle with Hetfield's voice in this album. I did not like it beforehand, but now it's like, okay, we get this really cool acoustic intro with the electric guitars. I'm really digging it. And then Hetfield's voice comes in, and I'm like, oh, okay, we're just going to do this. That's fine.
I don't mind his voice on this one because it's smoother, so the high-pitched nature of it doesn't really, I don't know, it doesn't bother me as much. Sometimes when he's like on Fight Fire with Fire and Ride the Lightning, when he's trying to snarl and he's got that higher register, he sort of has a little bit of like this bratty feel to it.
Yeah.
Whereas this, I feel like, is very heartfelt. And, you know, the lyrics are, he's singing about being depressed. Again, most of these songs on this album and most of thrash metal in general was about dragons and war and murder. And so the fact that they're playing this song full of acoustic guitar and him talking about hating his life, it's like, whoa, that was not expected of Metallica in 1984.
No, and actually, I think this album did a lot for kind of pushing new themes into this genre of music. And I mean, it's something I actually say in my closing statement, but you're right. There was a lot of it was almost like thrash metal was high fantasy before this, you know, and it was after this as well, but this would definitely introduce some of those other themes. But I do think that there's like the rolling drum is what I kept calling it in this. I do think that that's something good that Ulrich was doing there. And so like, that was where I was like, okay, he's on top of it. Maybe he's not a trash drummer. Maybe he's like, you know, bulk pickup day drummer. And
not trash. He's like the junk lugging company. Like, he's not a trash can. He's just an old desk that you got to get rid of.
Actually, so I had to get rid of an old desk. Well, I was helping a buddy move, and I had a truck at the time, and his desk was in such shitty like condition. We took it to 3 different thrift stores, and nobody would take it. And so it was in the back of my truck, and he was back there with it, and I was just driving, and he was like, "Hey, pull over up here." And he literally like I pulled off to the side of the street in this like neighborhood, and he opened my tailgate, kicked it out, and we pulled off. So anyway, back to this album, not my poor choices in life. Anyway, okay, I really like this song up to 355, and then it becomes a new song.
And I like that song too. I agree that it changes quite a bit, but I like where it goes.
I don't dislike that part, but it just becomes more of the Metallica guitar wanking that we heard before.
True.
And I don't dislike it, but I was really enjoying that first half of the song.
So something I wanted to point out about, you know, being a guitar player, something that's really cool about Metallica that this is going to sound silly, but I don't know how else to describe it. James's right hand is incredible, and Kirk's left hand is incredible. So if you listen to the actual rhythm chugs in a lot of songs, the patterns and stuff that James is doing is really cool and really interesting. And then Kirk is obviously going to bend and tap and solo all over the damn place. But you have these moments like from 423 to 437 where they lock in together on like a little harmonized lead line. That I think, again, I love Iron Maiden. They have 3 guitar players because they do stuff like that constantly. I love that sound. And they don't do it a ton, but when they do it, it's always nice.
I think it's funny that you say 433 because I feel like this song should have been done at 455. I don't think there was anything after 455. Maybe let's give it to like 530. Okay, give it 530. So a good bit after the last words are said. Give them plenty of time to get out some more wanking. You know, shoot their shot, do their thing. But then at 655, like okay, you've definitely filled up side A of this album.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I get it too. But at the same time, so to your point, okay, so I love 423 to 437 with that cool guitar lick. But then they're still noodling. But instead of it just going on and on and on, the tempo picks up at 4:51. So for the next section, you change the tempo. So again, yeah, I'm not going to argue with you on this one. This one to me does feel a little long. Mostly just because the intro is very long and epic, and then the outro is very long and epic. And you could have maybe shaved off a little bit here or there. But it still never gets to the point of me being like, is this going to end anytime soon? Because they're changing it up enough that I'm not losing interest.
All right, so let's flip this album over to side B, and let's start with track 5, Trapped Under Ice. Now, I'm not going to do what I did on the Blind Guardian where I said track 5 or 1, and yeah, so it's just track 5. All right, so we kick off side B with a punk intro. I mean, it's like it was this album, or Metallica is rooted in like the punk sound. Which then thrash metal came out of. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, at 33 seconds, we get a shredding solo. And it's one of those, it's a stink face solo, because I was listening to it going, oh, God, yeah, cool. But then those high-pitched, head-filled vocals are back.
So, to me, side 1 is over. You just ended side 1 with, like you said, 2 minutes of guitar wanking that was in the midst of a power ballad. And there's going to be a certain demographic of your fans coming from Kill 'Em All going, what is this shit? I don't want this. Where's the Metallica I love? So they start side B with the fastest, angriest song they've written so far. And so, me personally, I don't love this song. Like, for me, the music is fine, but I felt like for them, it was a statement piece. It was them basically saying, like, we're going to try these new things. We're going to expand. We're not going to be just another thrash casualty, but we're not going anywhere either. So sit down and buckle up while we kick your ass.
I like that term, thrash casualty. Like so, okay. So something I also noticed on track 5, and of course, you know, playing it on Spotify, you see the times of each song. Yeah. The first track on side A and side B are the shortest tracks off of those sides. And on this one, every track gets subsequently longer. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a strange thing to do, because it's like, here they throw this just fast-paced thrash metal song at you. I like to say it's a real quick song, but it's a 4-minute thrash metal song, which is still a long song for thrash metal. But it's cool. It's got that galloping guitar in it. I'm cool with it. Mm-hmm. It's not my favorite thing, but, you know, especially coming out of the power ballad, and I'm not going to apologize to Brian. It's a damn power ballad. But I thought this was a cool move. But at the same time, it's like, I was not in the mood for this anymore. And now we're here.
I won't say I wasn't in the mood for it. But again, you know, I hate to sound like a broken record. It's just, this isn't my favorite kind of Metallica. So for me, it's cool. I do like it. But I would much rather listen to another song like Fade to Black versus, you know, something like this. Now, a couple of little nuanced things that I think are a lot of fun on this song, because you're right, it is pretty much a straightforward, punky, thrashy kind of song. But a couple things that they do that I find interesting is I love the little pauses right after James says trapped under ice. Every time he does is trapped under ice. And it's just like half a second of silence. And I think that's really cool how they do that. And then there's also this really like cool, fun, tappy solo from like 255 to 306. This whole song is full of these like 10-second, 12-second little riffs and solos and stuff. It's almost, like I said, it just feels like them saying, we might slow it down a little bit. We might get into our feelings a little bit now, but we're still Metallica, and we're still can do it with the best of them, you know?
Yep. Track 6, Escape. This is a weird one coming out of what we just had.
And you may know why, doing some research, but if you don't, I can go ahead and kind of at least give the backstory to this one.
I do, but I'm going to let you do it.
Okay. And for anybody...
Say it like I don't know. Just...
Okay. Okay, edit all this out. Do you know the story behind this song?
I'm not going to play your game. Yes,
Damn
I know
it.
the story, but go on.
Okay, so super long story short, this was a 7-track album, and the record label basically said, you need one more, and we want it to be something a little bit more marketable. We don't want it to be 7 minutes long. We don't want it to be about dying. Like, what can you do? And so James kind of put this thing together, and I feel like you can tell. I almost feel like, to your point, before I did any research and I'm just listening to the songs, making notes, this was one I wasn't super familiar with. And I was just kind of like, something about this song ain't hitting me right. And then when I read into it, it was like, oh, well, that's because they were sort of forced to write it. And it feels like none of them really want to be playing it.
Yeah, because this one feels clumsy. It just doesn't feel... It doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel right, and that's why I say it feels weird. I mean, I'm okay with it after 20 seconds, but I don't love this one. That vocal melody he has in the chorus feels like it's straight off pop radio.
Yeah, and I feel like Metallica goes on to do an amazing job of mixing metal with pop hooks, like later on in their career. And this is not it. Like this just is not. But again, I think it's because they were being pushed to do it. Had it been organic and they wanted to write, hey guys, what if we did kind of like a thrashy upbeat song, but then we put a real smooth hook in the middle? I think they would have come up with something way better than that. Like I said, subsequent albums, they do. So this one, I feel like you can see them in the room kind of like not feeling it, like looking at each other from the sides of their eyes, shaking their heads and just, all right, guys, let's just get through it, you know?
Okay, I do have a question for you about this song.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everything you just said kind of explains it, but what happens at 2:28? It just feels very stuck in there, and it ruined the momentum of what was happening before. I mean, we get that same momentum back, but it's like, it's just not the same. I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And then for me too, it seems like kind of after that, they just kind of like
meander.
Yeah. Meander's a good word for it, because it just sort of goes on. And even at the end, the way James is singing that, like he's not really singing the chorus melody anymore. He's just kind of singing this much more monotone, and it just drags. And it sounds like they were like, they didn't even bother to write an outro for this song. They were like, just play it and we'll fade it out and get it over with.
Right. No, I think this is the only one that fades out on this album, but the siren that happens at 3:26.
Oh, yeah, don't like that either.
No, I don't like it, but it was needed there because I don't know, that after 2:28, I was kind of like, I'm not enjoying this anymore on any level. You know, before I could at least be okay with it, but now I'm done here. So, and then, a siren comes in. We're mixing it up a little bit, but I think they even recognize, like, we got to throw something else here. So,
yeah, they knew people would be like, you know, sitting there falling asleep, and they hit you with the air raid siren to wake you back up. I'm like, oh shit.
Track 7, Creeping Death.
Now let my people go.
this is another track that has all 4 current members writing credit. I think that's the second one that does. So this is just a good song. I mean, it's just a good song. If you don't know this song, if you're a fan of heavy music and you don't know Creep and Death, go listen to it. It's just a good one.
This, I mean, holy shit, when this song kicks in, even in 2025, that intro still is just nasty. And feels so good coming out of Escape into something this huge and iconic. I love it.
No, knowing that this was supposed to be a 7-track album, so I knew that this was a track that the record label was pushing for. I didn't know this was supposed to be a 7-track album, though. I didn't have that in my notes. But I do now, knowing that, I definitely feel like this should follow Trapped Under Ice a lot more, and Escape shouldn't even be there. That makes a lot of sense to me, because that intro feels more like it comes out of Trapped Under Ice. It feels more like the Metallica that the Metallica was thrashing in the one before.
And given sort of like the vibe of Ride the Lightning and For Whom the Bell Tolls, this song just fits perfectly with that, because it does have the thrashy elements, but it also has some hooky vocal choices. And hey, to our younger listeners, when your parents are like fussing at you for listening to music with bad words and stuff, here you go. You can play them this. Tell them it's a Christian band, because I mean, the lyrics are just straight up out of the Bible, and it's
right. Okay, so that I actually found the things behind this song more interesting than the song. Like, yes, I enjoyed the song. I do feel like it could have been cut short. I feel like it should have been a 4.5 minute song, not a 6.5 minute song. But I feel like, and that goes back to what I was saying in the beginning, that I feel like those things should have just been left to live, like where they kind of, throw it out. But at the same time, 8-track album, they're trying to fill both sides of the record. I get it. Fine. Okay. So Monster's right. Straight out of the Bible. It's Exodus 12:29. It's about the plague of the death of firstborn. And I thought that was a neat thing that they were able to take this. And this is kind of where I started kind of piecing together the whole thing about how their lyrics were, kind of growing, and they were meaning deeper things, kind of like Rush's were and all. But do you know where the title of the song comes from?
Why don't you tell us?
So they were watching 10 Commandments at Cliff Burton's house, and they pulled this from it. And that's where I went, I have seen that movie several times. I'd probably seen it, 5 times. And I don't remember that phrase being in the movie, but I still thought it was a cool thing that phrase came from the 10 Commandments movie.
One of the things that I came across was, yes, this song is a story from the Bible, but no, they weren't sitting around reading the Bible. They were watching a movie. Right.
And I thought that was interesting as well, that this is not the story from the Bible. This is the story from the Charlton Heston movie.
So I've been very kind to Lars, as you have not. But this is the one where I feel like he's dutching things up, because that like it's got this really cool chug to it, and then Lars does these like dugga 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 like little top things that are just like, oh, like that could be better. Like it's not enough to like deter me from loving the song, but I'm just like,
so
come on.
Anybody listening is obviously not going to be able to see either one of us, but from what Monster just did, Lars didn't Dutch it up. He cavemanned it up.
I picture he still has the hammers from that anvil section earlier, and we're just like, me hit Tom, da da da, and they just like sped it up.
Okay, so I found something neat about this one. So journalist Joel McIver called this song a mosh pit anthem, and I get it because, yeah, it just is.
Okay, so you mentioned you felt like it was a little bit too long.
Yeah.
Well, what I think is cool about this one is you have the basic song. You have the verses and the, I'm creeping death, like kind of hook. But then you go into this section that starts around 3:39 where you just get this like, boom, 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 boom. And it's like this huge epic. Like it fits the story of the lyrics, but then musically you can just, you hear everybody chanting along and it's just nasty. Like, I mean,
that's cool. That still fits within the 4.5 minutes.
So you want it to end with that and not go back into any of the other stuff.
Right.
That's a terrible idea. And I'm glad they didn't do that.
You're a terrible idea. Track 8, Call of Cthulhu. Is it? Okay, so I know it's taken from H.P. Lovecraft. So I always read it as Cthulhu, even though it's just Ktulu.
So here's something funny about that. The mythos is that if you say Cthulhu's name, he becomes more powerful.
Right.
So they decided to misspell it and call it Cthulhu instead.
Okay.
But what actually is probably more likely is they just misspelt it and just rolled with it because
that's fair. Cthulhu's not the easiest name to spell. So
no, and I think they even said like with the C and the TH and all that, they were like, let's just like simplify it and make it, easier to say and to read. One more thing though, before we get off of Creeping Death.
Sorry.
Are
we going back to Creeping Death? Are you going to creep it back in?
Yeah, we're going to creep back to death and then call Cthulhu back. So during Creeping Death, there are a lot of these really subtle bass noodles throughout. And a lot of times they happen when Caveman Lars is doing those dut-dut-dut-duts. And if you don't know they're there, you'll miss them. And it's a damn shame because Cliff is really nailing it on that song, and it kind of goes unnoticed. But anyway, I just wanted to give that real quick. Back to the call of, I'm going to say Cthulhu because it feels weird saying Cthulhu.
Yeah. So I feel like Cthulhu is like the children's book version of Cthulhu. So.
Do you remember that? Like when that was like a thing for a little while? It was like cute Cthulhus everywhere.
I do remember that. All right. So before I listened to this song, I looked at that time and I said, 9 minutes, really? Really? And then it was like, okay, it's instrumental. Fine, I don't have to deal with Hetfield's high-pitched voice. But 9 minutes, really?
I agree. A 9-minute instrumental is not my jam.
No.
But I will say, every section of this song, the guitar lines are perfection. Like I have no complaints. Perfection. They're
not real.
Neither is Cthulhu. But I love it. They're beautiful, but they're terrifying. Like they have this haunting feel to them that I really, really like.
Okay, so I really enjoyed the first half of this one, and I feel the same way as you were just talking about. And okay, so I have no problem with an instrumental track. I mean, we've talked plenty about instrumental tracks in other places, how we'd rather hear an instrumental version of a song or an album and all, and I have no problem with the instrumental track. But when you're giving me an instrumental track on the back of like thrash metal jam sessions already, it's kind of like, okay, we're going to be pushing a little bit. And so this is one that I had to listen to separately. I couldn't go into this, after he taking in the full album, which I didn't feel like really took anything away from it because I feel like it's a piece all within itself. And so I found every time I really enjoyed the first half. And I'm not going to say there was a certain time point, but it's like there was a feeling switch that happened around 4.5 to 5 minutes, somewhere in that stretch. And I just kind of stopped enjoying it. I found myself getting bored in that last half. And it was like I just didn't want to listen to the rest of it.
I find myself like if I'm not necessarily like, sitting down taking notes and this is just on, it just kind of washes over me. But when I'm paying attention to it, I feel like once I hear the like 3 or 4 guitar segments, I'm kind of with you. I've heard the bulk of what the song's going to do, and I like it. Now, to get into the back half, though, a couple things that I did notice. First of all, this is another one that if you put some decent low-end headphones on and listen for it, Cliff is doing some fun stuff. He's not just playing the root notes to the guitars. He's adding his own little lines, and it's really cool. At 6:09, these big power chords come in. And I really like what it does there because, I love my old 30s and 40s horror movies. And a lot of those movies, the score was basically just like an organ. And it got me thinking, not just the movies, but did you ever listen to those like Inner Sanctum Mysteries or any of those old radio broadcast mystery shows from back in those days?
I've heard some before, but I can't say that I've really listened to them. I don't think I've listened to a full one. I know I've listened to like bits and pieces of them and all. So
when I was younger, my dad would get like collections of them on cassette from the library. And if we were like going to be in the car for a few hours going somewhere, we would listen to a couple of them. And they all had like these weird, like, like weird, like theremins and organs and stuff. And so for me, this was like the heavy metal equivalent. So I kind of dug on that. And then something else I was going to mention is there is another really cool one of those twin guitar harmonies that starts around 7:22. That I really like when they do that. I'm with you. It definitely goes on a long time, but it's your album closer. You've put out this, it's an epic closer. So I mean,
no, it does feel like a closer because it does, really bring things out. And Cthulhu really brought the end to the world. So,
it's true. And so we brought it up earlier, the S&M, the orchestra Metallica collaboration thing.
Symphony. That's what the S in S&M stands for. Symphony and Metallica.
Sorry, as soon as I hear S&M, my brain goes somewhere else.
Yeah, it gets all tied up. And
that's it. Best joke of the night. We'll see you next week. But no, the version of this from S&M is cool. It's very cool. Parts of it feel like a movie score, and I really, really dug it. I'm not going to say it's better necessarily, but I do think it adds a really cool flavor to it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. All right, Monster, let me ask you a question. What's new with you?
Hey, good looking. What you got? Cooking.
I don't know, man.
I was really wondering what you were going to pull out on this one. I don't know. I really don't know. I struggled with this too. I think if I had to pick one, I would say maybe For Whom the Bell Tolls. Only because it is mostly mid-tempo. It never really thrashes. So it does sort of have this kind of steady groove about it. The bass is a little more prominent on that one. So it has a little bit of new in it, but God, not much. I mean, that's fair.
In Danger, what's cooking?
For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Nice.
I feel like we're syncing up on our selections lately.
Are we back in college?
We are. We're back at the same school. So.
Roomies.
All right, Monster, would you like to give us your closing statement since it was your brother that brought this one to us?
Sure. I can start with some positives, and then you can bring the whole show to a crashing, depressing halt.
I will do it gladly.
Ride the Lightning was the transitional album that would start Metallica's rise from the top of the thrash pile to becoming a household name and arguably the biggest name in rock and metal today. The album is close to a masterpiece, and the bulk of its shortcomings are only noticeable by comparing the songs to stuff from later albums. Songs like For Whom the Bell Tolls showed they were learning how to combine fast and heavy music with lyrics you could sing along to, in melodies that could get stuck in your head. And then songs like Fade to Black showed they could slow it down and still be just as heavy and aggressive while also singing more introspective and heartfelt lyrics. The main issues I have with this album is the 1984-ness of it all. I wish the bass was a little louder. I wish James' voice was a little deeper. You can tell the band is still not 100% sure about some of the choices they are making. But there is no denying that most of these songs are heavy metal classics and have stood the test of time far better than most of their contemporaries. Even if you don't love every song on this album, there is no denying its lasting impact on Metallica's career and the future of heavy metal in general. Not my favorite Metallica album. That spot belongs to the often maligned and misunderstood Saint Anger. Just kidding. But I do think Metallica is still putting out great albums that combine super fast, thrashy riffs with big choruses and more melody than most old school heavy metal bands know what to do with. And that all started with what they experimented with on this album. 1 to 10, I said 7.87.
It's funny, like, I had my finger on the 7. Like, I know kind of where you're going to go on a lot of these now. So, anyway.
It's, again, like I said, it's not my favorite Metallica, but I recognize how important it is. So, that made me score it a little higher than I would just based on how much I enjoy listening to it, if that makes sense.
That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah. So, Danger, give us your low score.
Ride the Lightning addresses all the common themes of the future of metal. Capital punishment, death, suicide, and nuclear annihilation. Musically, the album exists in a time where thrash intersected with prog. This made raising the bar on technical ability and structure almost necessary to survive in music. It forced the metal boy to grow up into the metal man. Ride the Lightning put hair on the chests of plenty of listeners. Well, I guess it made hair grow in ears because we don't listen to music with our chest. There's no denying that this is an important album to thrash metal, but overall, I found it boring. Sure, it has its great places, but that leads me to my biggest issue here. It's either fantastic or it's just guitar wanking and I get tired of hearing it. The half a song of instrumental stuff should stay to the live shows. I don't need a thrash metal version of Fish. I gave this album a 5.01.
Too low, but not disrespectfully low.
Yeah, fair. All right, so Monster gave Metallica's Ride the Lightning a 7.87, and I gave it a 5.01, which gives it an overall average of 6.44, putting it into the 40th position, just below This Wildlife and just above Movements.
Ay, caramba. That's disrespectful.
That would be a terrible show to go see.
That's the worst tour I've ever heard.
If you disagree with the score that we have given this album, then please head on over to one of our social media platforms, Facebook, X, or Instagram, Breakdowns for Breakfast across all those, or shoot us an email at breakdownsbreakfast@gmail.com and let us know what you thought about this album, this episode. Let us know if there's an album that you'd like for us to talk about in the future. Please send us a request. We love getting requests. Give us some feedback. Rate this episode. We think it deserves a 5-star, but we understand if you think it deserves a 2. You know, we get it.
Split the difference and give us a 3.5.
Yeah, fair.
And be sure to tune in on Thursday, where you can get even more Ride the Lightning goodness, because I will be doing a deep dive into the recording of this album, a lot of fun stories that we didn't bring up, a couple things we did touch on, but there's a lot more to talk about. And I even get to bring up Stephen King. I'm excited. So before we go, though, I got to tell you, I discovered something today that made me very happy.
What's that?
If James Hetfield were to officiate Kermit and Miss Piggy's wedding, he'd be a pastor of Muppets.